Anora is the new movie from Sean Baker, who directed The Florida Project. He directed Red Rocket, and he's a really talented filmmaker. I really love his movies. They always deal with real people going through real problems, not the typical like Hollywood movies with these very clear like blockbuster formulas. What I loved about Anora is the story feels very natural. It doesn't feel like this movie that you've seen a million times before. Even if it is dealing with a romance story and kind of like a struggle with a romance story, it's bringing a new angle to it, and that's what I want to talk about today. This movie I've been very excited to see since it was announced back in May. This won the Palme d'Or, which is the coveted Best Award at the Cannes Film Festival, and it was the first American movie to do so since 2011, since Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. And I was wondering, like, what inspired everyone to vote for this movie. There's always great movies that win that top award, and they're, like, the best movies in the world. Last year was Anatomy of a Fall, really great French language movie. And I was wondering, what did everyone from all over the world, everyone who's on the jury, think about Anora? Why is it such a universally loved story? And watching it, I instantly was able to tell. The movie follows Anora, she goes by Ani, who's a sex worker in Brooklyn. She's 23, lives with her sister in a kind of like crappy like apartment. She's not really loving it. I love how this movie just like introduces its world. It's very old fashioned. They have the title cards at the beginning, just kind of playing over one sequence. It's a movie that's very confident with itself, and I loved that. And in the movie, Anora, she gets asked by her boss to go entertain this young guy who shows up at her club one day, and he's this young Russian guy. He wants a woman who speaks Russian, so he goes and speaks to Ani, and he eventually goes out on several dates with her, and they kind of develop a relationship, and he asks her to get married, and the movie kind of goes from there. They have this really great relationship, and she kind of just treats it like this is business. He's this rich, spoiled kid, and from that point, she's deciding if she actually really wants a relationship, if he's serious about a relationship. He just seems like some like foolish kid. One of the best parts of the movie is the chemistry the two actors have. She does a great job at playing this call girl who is just clearly hustling, trying to make a living, but she's very passionate. She's good at what she does. And the actor who plays the Russian kid is really great too. He's so convincing, so believable at just being the like spoiled son of this really rich guy who just kind of lives in this mansion by himself. He's bored. He hires this prostitute to come and hang out with him. It really just works because the characters themselves are so believable. And it's never like the movie gets to a point where you're saying, oh, this, like, some serious shit is going down. Obviously, there are lots of, like, there's tension and plot changes going on throughout, but it isn't like a typical blockbuster or, like, there's a clear, like, problem, have to solve it. It just kind of feels almost like a play to me, but that's really what I loved about it. This movie reminded me of all the movies I kind of watched in film school, the independent films, mostly the works of John Cassavetes, which all his movies were kind of mostly in one location. There was lots of tension, lots of arguing, lots of fighting. And it's not just like you're watching people argue. You're watching these very real conversations that feel like they could be in real life. And it's not like it's just conversation. There's action. Characters are like throwing stuff around the room. They're fighting. They're trying to figure out something. Everyone's like on a different page. Everyone is just like trying to be on the same page. I think that's what makes this movie so entertaining, is there's so much conflict just from like something so simple as the main characters get married, Anora and the Russian guy, and then when his parents find out, they send these henchmen to kind of stop the marriage. And that's where the movie's plot really kicks in. Like, this movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and to me, it felt like they kind of get married an hour in, and then the next 80 minutes is mostly just this conflict, but it isn't even like this conflict where there's these very specific things that happen. Like, it's mostly just trying to find the kid because he runs away. He doesn't want to confront the henchmen who work for his parents. He just is gone, and that provides such an interesting dynamic where this girl who got married to him, Anora, is stuck with the henchmen trying to find him. And they go on this chase through New York, through Brooklyn, trying to find him. And this could easily be very boring. It could easily just have this weird chemistry, but it doesn't at all because the actors are so great. you have this really great sense of irony. There's Anora, who is just trying to get back with her husband, and then you have the question of, does he really love her, or did he just marry her impulsively, which is kind of like in the back of the audience's mind the whole time, in the back of my mind at least, and I really don't want to like go into everything, because I think it's best to kind of go into this with a very, like, not really knowing what happens. But you just get to watch these very human interactions. And it's funny. There's a lot of comedy, like I said, and a lot of drama. And it's kind of so perfectly mixed together. You don't get a balance like that in movies that often. Like when the henchmen come and try to restrain her, it's funny because they aren't really being like violent towards her. They just want to keep her there so they can like annul this marriage. And she obviously doesn't want that. She's telling them to get off of her, and they're just kind of like holding her there, and she's being like, she's fighting back. And there's so much great comedy that comes from this, but also drama. And it reminded me also of the Safdie brothers movies like Good Time or Uncut Gems. I think it's comparable to that in how it takes something that's very real and adds conflict and tension. But this movie is also significantly funny. It isn't, I didn't think Uncut Gems was as funny. I think there's a lot of slapstick between the henchmen and Anora, especially how there's one henchman who his name's Yuri, who's supposed to be kind of like tough, but he obviously has a crush on Anora, and it adds this very sweet kind of contrast in the plot where this whole time she is in love with this guy who kind of, like, they're then trying to find him, but this henchman likes her, and you have this really interesting dynamic, and there's conflict, but there's also a bit of comedy, and it all kind of leads into this ending that feels very natural, very grounded. It doesn't have some crazy reveal. It all kind of honestly winds down perfectly, where it doesn't just end abruptly. There is like a feeling that you're getting to the end, that everything that has been kind of sought after or dealt with gets dealt with. There's even funny reveals where you think it's going to end, but then the henchmen realize they kind of made a mistake and they have to go somewhere completely else. I don't want to ruin all the great reveals, but it is such a great job of kind of giving this really tragic story, this humorous through line. And it reminded me of the Safdie brothers and John Cassavetes, with just how it has these very closed off, like an entire section of this movie just takes place in a house, but it doesn't feel like that. Like it felt like 40 minutes of this movie take place in this one house, this one scene, but so much is happening. It's like in the beginning of Beau is Afraid, how all this stuff is happening in the apartment. It's just brilliant. It keeps one scene that's pretty contained so entertaining, and I loved that. I would say this is like one of the best surprises of the year, but I've been hearing nothing but great stuff about this movie, so I'm not surprised. I really do recommend seeing Anora, especially seeing it in a packed theater. I think that's the best way to experience this. I saw this in the city at the Angelica on Houston Street, and it was a totally sold out screening. It was great. People were laughing. No one was really crying, but the ending was very interesting because it goes from so funny and so just like such an enjoyable, albeit like serious movie, to having a very, just like a very kind of cold ending, and everyone was very just like quiet. It was a great experience to see in a theater. I love this movie because of the emotional roller coaster it takes you on, and because it honestly does feel very satisfying. I don't think a lot of people will feel maybe satisfied with the ending. I know when it ended for me, I was kind of like, oh really? Like, but then I think like a couple of minutes after, I just had to take it in. I'm like, that feels like the perfect way to end this movie. So guys, let me know what you think. If you like Anora, I highly recommend going to see this in a big packed theater. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks so much for watching. Today we're going to be reviewing Anora, which just dropped. It's playing in theaters, came out on Friday. It was playing in New York and LA starting October 18th, but now it is out. I've been so excited to see this movie since it won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival back in May. And I remember when that happened, I told you, oh, this is the first time an American movie has won since 2011, since The Tree of Life, which is a pretty big deal. Getting to see an American movie kind of just, it made me think, what about this movie is so special? Why does everyone like this film? And after seeing it, I kind of understand. I think personally this movie should and will win the Best Picture Oscar. It should.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna win some Oscars for sure. Before you even told me that it won like the top film in the festival, I remember we saw it in the theaters for one of the trailers for another movie we were watching, and I remember both of us were like, oh, like we have to see this. And then I remember like after that you were like, oh, like I heard it won like in the festival. I was like, oh wow, so it gave us even more of a reason. So we went into it with really high hopes, and honestly, like at first I was like, I remember sitting in the theater, I was like, oh, I hope this isn't a letdown, but I'm like, no, like it's not just like hyped up like the Joker was hyped up, it actually won like actual like an award, so you know that like it's a good film and it wasn't a letdown whatsoever.
Oh my god, so different from the Joker, and yeah, especially even the first one,
or even like Megalopolis. Like I don't know, I feel like we went into that kind of like hyped up for it.
No, I mean a little, but let's be honest, Megalopolis we kind of all knew was going to be like really trash just based on trailers alone. You had no idea what it was about.
What was the movie we went in like hyped for and we were like let down by it?
I mean, maybe a little bit of that movie. But I think with Anora, the best thing about this movie to me is it is such a real depiction of people. It is entertaining without being exploitative or being or kind of being stereotypical.
The main girl, I think her real name is
Mikey Madison.
Mikey Madison. I was just watching an interview last night, and she said she really was not like had no knowledge of like sex workers at all, and she was watching from day in the life or like night in the life of a sex worker. She like got like even like private like lap dances. Like she went full in immersing herself into it. Like,
not the private lap dances.
She wanted it to be as authentic and real as possible, and they did a screening for actual like sex workers in the city, and they all gave it like the clap of honor with their like heels, which is like this is like a real raw description. This isn't like a BS like fake like description, and that just shows how Mikey Madison that just shows how if you put in that effort, you can have a depiction of a job or a specific type of person in a real true way. It's just the actor or actress wanting to put in that extra work. Mm-hmm. She knew no Russian whatsoever, like at all, none at all before it, but yeah.
She's the perfect pick for this movie, and I was thinking that too. I was thinking he cast her, and obviously she's getting a ton of like awards buzz. People think she's gonna win an Oscar. I think she definitely should at least be like one of the front runners to win.
Her kind of, would you say like
her breakout?
Exactly. Her real breakout role. I know she was in like
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Scream. Yeah, she had significant roles in those movies. In both movies, she was the villain, which is kind of funny, or one of the villains.
This was like a step up to be like,
the main.
No shit.
Yeah,
like,
no, this is
not
her.
Even the main. Yes, the main, but also like a real, true, like Oscar-worthy like movie.
Yeah, and what you were saying about the performances, I really think that's some of the best stuff here, because I think his name's Mark Edelstein, who plays Ivan, the Russian main character. He's very great, and he was talking about how he did a lot of improv for the movie, which I think definitely helped, because his character is so quirky and funny, and he was discussing with Sean Baker, the director, things he could do to make his character.
The rolling on the bed.
Exactly.
Also,
all the best parts are.
He did his like his, what's it called when you're kind of trying to get the role? What do you call it? Your audition. He did his like audition / self-tape like fully naked.
Yes. Yeah. No, it really is a movie that, and they've been advocating for this, that Sean Baker makes a lot of indie films. He made Red Rocket, Florida Project, Tangerine. They're movies that are real, and they're not like these kind of studio movies where you have this, like it has we were talking about I Saw the TV Glow, and I was saying like obviously that has a kind of very strange, it's an experimental.
It tried to have the vibe and edginess and rawness that Anora has, but they filmed.
No, I don't think that. I think that Anora was very different, but it did have like a different kind of structure. But I think Anora was more, it doesn't have like a very clear Hollywood like beginning, middle, and end. It feels like an older Hollywood movie to me in a way, just with how things are kind of happening. But I think in Hollywood movies is what I'm saying. Like I Saw the TV Glow, it like none of it, it's almost like a puzzle piece where you're like, what the hell's happening? But with this movie, it's giving you that beginning, middle, and end. But unlike a Hollywood movie, which like explains everything to you, this just kind of like is more natural how everything's happening, you know? Like I think in big blockbusters, they'll always tell you like, so you're telling me like the world is going to end if we don't do this.
But I I get that they were different types of films. I saw the TV Glow and Anora, but I feel like there's just something more real and raw about Anora and the way it's filmed, and like that I like more than how they did I Saw the TV Glow. I feel like it wasn't as real and raw, so I think
they're totally different movies.
I get that they're different movies, but I feel like I totally get different stories, different movies in general, but I feel like I Saw the TV Glow wanted to be a more like real, intense movie, and I just feel like Anora did that better with certain different ways.
Yeah, I did enjoy Anora more, and I want to talk about what really was so great about it, why I think people like it. It really does just a great job with pacing. It's honestly incredible, because this movie to me, it flew by. This is a 2-hour, 20-minute movie, but the way it's paced, the way it introduces characters, the way it like has really great chemistry with all of the actors is definitely something that makes this movie just great to me. You have this, I kind of do want to get into spoiler territory here. I think the only way to discuss, kind of break down Anora is to spoil it. So I do want to just give it a great recommendation. If you haven't seen it, definitely see it, because it's see it with a crowd. It's such an immersive experience.
Yeah, our theater was full.
It's very funny, and then when there are sad moments, like everyone's dead silent. Like, I will just say, without spoiling it, like people are laughing and like cheering, and just like the whole movie, everyone was, and then like when it ends, like it was dead silent. No one
was
talked.
Because that's
it was just such a great ending.
It was.
But we do want to talk about spoilers, so we're gonna do that right now. So spoiler warning. But yeah, I think, and we can just get right into it. Like, the pacing is great. You right away at the beginning meet Mark Edelstein's Yvonne, and you kind of think like, okay, he's a main character. You were saying this to me, which I like. You were saying you thought this was going to be a love story, and it is a love story, and it is marketed as a love story, and it is. But the best thing it does is it's always giving you like a little suspense. Like the first hour of this movie's brilliant. You get to see this. It's first of all kind of like a fish out of water story. Like, the girl meets the guy at the club, Vanya, and they hang out, and at first she just like is, casually hanging with him, and he says, come to my house, and then she goes to his house, which is his parents' house, and it's this mansion, and she's like, oh, I get to be in this mansion, this is amazing. And it's this really great, like, it's like a budding romance where they're being together, and you were wondering like what his intentions are. He's just this really funny guy, and the movie is so good because it doesn't like really answer that, or just kind of letting you feel this relationship. Really, there's no really like strong plot, like conflict at the beginning, right? It's more just kind of her meeting this guy, and I feel like the only conflict would be with her saying like, what am I gonna do with my life? Like, she works at a strip club, and there's tensions between her and her coworkers, and that's just kind of like setting the ground, though, I feel. And then she spends a lot of time with him, and it's really entertaining. This is like where it just felt like a real authentic movie. Like, they're just walking around New York. They're going to like that shop in Brooklyn with the girl who, like, remember, she's like, oh, there's like a deaf old man who works here, and they're just like interacting with all these weird New York people. Then they like fly to Vegas. It's just a lot of fun, and it's really good because it's setting the groundwork, and it's always kind of giving you these like really fun situations, and then right away it kind of like flips the story a little less than halfway, where you find out that he asked this girl to get married, kind of like for a green card marriage, and then the henchmen from his family come after him because obviously he's just this spoiled kid doing this for fun. But I think the best thing about this movie is it doesn't like fully let you know that. You kind of are going into it wondering if this is like a real romance, but I think part of you might know that it's just like in the girl's head that Yvonne is just doing this like just for fun. I just think what's so good about the movie is it really like plays with your expectations, and then in the second act, once the boy kind of disappears or he runs away, then Anora spends a lot of time with the henchmen, and then it kind of shifts into the second act where she's hunting down Yvonne with the henchmen to get the marriage annulled. And I just love the change of pace. I think that how it like has these two acts that are totally different. How at the beginning it's all her and Yvonne, and then the whole second act is her trying to find Yvonne, and you're wondering what's going to happen from that. I thought that was just very fun to me, at least, and it just is really entertaining. What'd you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that, but I personally think that I like the fact that from some people might think of the ending and go, all right, well, what the fuck? Like, that's what? Because they watch it and they think the movie is about, like, a romance, almost, like it's a romance movie. And, like, I think that's what they wanted. They wanted it to seem like it was a romance movie, but the deeper meaning was that, if you think about it, the movie's name is Anora. Anora is Annie, the girl. And it's just about, like, almost, she's only 23, so I don't want to say coming of age, but it's about her and her learning things and realizing things. And I know Andrew and we talked about the end of the movie, and I feel like that end part really, for me, kind of showed that she was finally, like, because, well, the bald guy gave her the ring, and she was just like, oh, fuck, like, she's been, like, rude to him, you know, like, not taking him seriously, and then, like, that kind of just proved, like, oh, wow, like, this is a man, and he cares about me. And the only way that she has been able to show, like, I don't want to say love, but in her eyes, love or care for a significant, like, a guy, is by sex and intimacy within, like, sex, like, because she's a sex worker. And so that's when she kind of just, like, got on top of them and they started. And I feel like even when you see his face in it, he's kind of just like, okay, but he's like, this isn't kind of what I like. I don't need this.
Yeah.
And then they, like,
was like, I won't say no, but it was like he is like, he did want something, like, more, I feel like, with her.
Definitely,
the
but
way
he
even
was,
says I like Anora,
he's
like, putting
a
her on the couch.
respectful man, and she's not used to that. And then it was like she was going in for the kiss, and, like, it was just like that moment of in between, and then she was just like, fuck, like, just, like, kind of hitting him, and then he just grabbed her, and she just, like, was, like, paused for a second and just broke down. And to me, that's showing that for the first time she feels comfortable enough and vulnerable enough with a man to not only be intimate physically, but, like, sexually, but intimate in an emotional, vulnerable state of, like, emotion. She broke down and cried. Never did you see that, where it was just fun and happiness, and, like, we never saw Yvonne, like, annoyed ever with Anora, because he was just so happy, and he's just an immature, young 21-year-old who has daddy's money and is just la 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 la. There's no care in the world. And so it was almost like, I don't know, like, at the end, I think it proves and it shows how she has grown as a person and as a whole, and I think the ending, just ending like that, there's no other way that it could have ended.
Yeah, it was a perfect ending to me. And it's funny because I think initially I was thinking this is a pretty sad ending, but you were saying it was a pretty hopeful ending.
I see it, yeah, I remember that.
I think it works like that too. It just ends in a very...
I don't see it as sad. Maybe, like, 10% sad, but the rest is...
And just the way it's depicted is...
Not happy, but hopeful, because it's showing... like, Anora is a complex character, obviously, and it's showing by the end she's realizing stuff, she's growing as a person, you know? All, like, she just thought, like, sex, that's, like, what men wanted, that's what, like, you know what I mean? And she's finally found a guy that doesn't just like her for the sex. Someone who actually wants to get to know her on a real emotional, deep level is the vibe I'm getting. And she just grows as a person, where you never saw her break down and cry in front of anyone. She always kept it cool, and, like, in the bathroom alone, maybe she, like, start getting a little emotional. But at that end, that was the first time it was a powerful, powerful ending. And I feel like for some who didn't fully get it, maybe would be annoyed by the ending. But, like, because sometimes I do get annoyed at endings. I'm like, oh, well, you gave us nothing. Like, what? Like, what was that ending? Like, what's going to happen? But I fully, like, right when it ended, I was like, yeah, no, that's the perfect ending. Like, it couldn't have ended any other way. And I fully think this movie is a movie just about a young 23-year-old sex worker trying to figure out life with what she was given. And yeah, learning just more about herself and about what she like needs and stuff. But one thing that never changed within herself was her powerfulness of how she held herself to others. She was a badass bitch and no one was gonna fuck with her.
Even at the end, like with the mother, I did like this. I really like how, first of all, most of the movie is great because it's all these, and I do want to talk about this, like the physical comedy of it, because it's so funny, like how you go from the initial act with Yvonne and like the kind of romance with Yvonne and Ani, and just seeing like them together is funny. But then once he flees, like when his parents' henchmen come, and there's all this, I like how there's all this conflict. Like Anora obviously doesn't want them to like break or come into the house because she's married to him, but it's all just this miscommunication, you know, like they're obviously not trying to hurt her, and they have this discussion at the end, like they all want the same thing, but they all are frustrated and they're all upset and confused, and that's why there's some like, I don't know if it's like dark comedy, but I mean a little bit, like where they're tying her up and they're trying to like keep her calm and she's like biting them, and it's funny.
Actual funny, like silly comedy, and then there was a little dark comedy in there too.
Yeah, and I really like how it's all this build up with all the henchmen trying to find Yvonne, and Anora eventually kind of like, at first she doesn't like them, and that's like where the tension comes from. There's such good conflict, and it's so grounded and real and uncomfortable at parts, especially where like, even like where the guy Toros, the guy like leaves the baptism service, or just like where they're going to all these like clubs and asking if they've seen, like he's like, this is a very sick boy.
Yeah.
And there's just such good like moments, like where he's like, I don't have Instagram, I'm an adult, and they're like looking at the pictures on Instagram.
They did it so well, because sometimes like comedy and stuff like that, you feel like they're trying too hard and you're like, that doesn't work. It fully fits.
It fits though, because there's plenty of tension. You feel the tension that everyone's feeling. They don't want to get fired. Anora just wants to stay in this marriage. Everyone's mad at each other, but it's all justified, and it's all kind of like perfectly paced that eventually they kind of start to work together, and it's fun.
Also, I think it really just shows like Yvonne and his family, how they are as people. When the bald guy was like, I think Yvonne should apologize to her, and Yvonne's mom goes, my son does not apologize to anyone. So as mad as she is, she's mad for her own image.
Exactly.
She doesn't give a shit that he did something not right at all, because he doesn't care. She calls the Nora a whore and a bitch and everything. She could care less. What she cares about is the image of her and her family and anyone that has to do with her, like close, you know. So I was just like, damn, like that kind of shows, and that shows then why Yvonne is how he is. You learn how, like, you get your personality and stuff from how you grow up and your parents raise you. So that just shows why and how Yvonne, honestly, at the end, when Anora they were about to get on the plane, and Anora was like, Yvonne, like, what are we, like, doing? And he's like, kind of like, we're getting on the plane and getting a divorce. Like, what else are we doing? You know? And he was just like, but yeah, like, no, I had fun. Like, thanks for a fun week. You know, it's like nothing to him. Yeah, it was a great like subversion of expectations, and because it starts very much like you are really wondering where he is. Like, I feel like you kind of in your head, or at least I know, where like he probably, and they even say like he ran off. They're like, he's a boy. In the beginning of when he first ran off, like you have that like little part that's like, oh damn, he just left her. Like he, like, you know, like,
you're
does
thinking maybe
he love her?
will come back,
and then you have that hope. It's like, okay,
not.
well, like maybe like is it true love? Like, are they gonna like? But then once you realize like
he just went to the strip club, and I like how they don't show it at first.
When they went to
a
bar in general, and they're like, have you seen this boy? And the bartender was like, yeah, like 20 minutes ago. And then it's like, oh fuck, he's like going out drinking. He does not give a shit.
And they don't tell you this though till like 40 minutes after he's like kind of gone, so you're kind of wondering, and then eventually they just cut to him randomly like at the club.
Once he goes to the strip club, though, I'm like, fuck him. And I think I looked at you when he went to the strip club, and I'm like, fuck him.
Yeah, it was the perfect place too. I said it is random, but I like how they wait so long after he initially like runs away, so you're kind of just like wondering with them, like, where could he be? It adds suspense. It was so great. And I do love just like talking about the mother.
That also shows, actually, because they were like, and Annie was like, oh, like, let's check, like, our friends, let's check places we've been that were meaningful, and that just shows how it really doesn't mean shit to him, all, like, his American friends and the warm, like, fun times he had with Annie and his friends at, like, the beach and stuff. Like, they went to the most, like, quote-unquote meaningful places that they thought, and really, like, he was just drinking and trying to, like, hook up with the sex worker. So that also shows how he literally does not give a shit about anyone but himself. You know?
Yeah. And that, I just like also how at the end, you were talking about how, like, Anora's a badass bitch. I like how she stands up to him, but, like, he refuses to acknowledge her because that's, like, who he is. He's not going to admit that, yeah, he just, like, used her. But then at the end, I like how the whole time it's been these kind of her versus these men and the henchmen, and it's not even like they're really, like, that opposing. We learned that they're just, like, these henchmen who just, like, want to help the family. They don't want to get fired, and they all just kind of, like, end up working together. But I like how, like, the final boss is, like, Yvonne's mom, and it's kind of like
I stood up to her,
yeah,
too.
I thought it would have been weird if it was, like, the dad doing it, but, like, just because we've already seen her, like, dealing with, like, these guys.
I liked it that it was the mom.
I liked that she, like, kind of put the mom in her place.
The mom was like, you whore, and that's when she turned back and was like, whore? And she goes, your son hates you so much that he married a whore just to annoy you.
And then even the dad started laughing.
And the dad started laughing.
That was one of the best moments.
Is that my scarf? And she goes, oh yeah, you want your scarf? Take it, and throws it at her. The dad keeps on laughing, and she goes, you know what? Take this jacket too. And then she throws it on Yvonne.
It was great.
And then she walks out, and she's like, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah, but Anora was great. It was my favorite movie of the year, I believe. So far, I also really liked Dee Dee. I liked Dune Part 2. I really liked Red 1. I'm just kidding. That's not one of my favorites of the year. But guys, let me know what you think if you really liked Anora. I really just absolutely adored this movie. It was such a beautiful, entertaining film. I could rewatch this over and over. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think.